What's up, and welcome to the Very Best Self podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Brown. Tune in each week as I have candid conversations with inspiring humans, including athletes, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and anyone out there making waves. Get ready to leave your comfort zone behind, step into your power, and live a more purpose-driven life. I am so happy that you're here. Now let's do this. Hi! OMG. Wow, we are here. It's episode 1, season 1, day 1, the starting line. It is all happening. I want to officially welcome you to the Very Best Self podcast. I am your host, Victoria Brown, and I cannot tell you how honored I am that you're here. So we are going to interview some amazing, incredible people throughout this whole entire process. We're going to share their stories. We're going to talk about their journey. But I figured in this very first episode that I should start with me. I should tell you why I'm here. I should give you a little bit about my story, my background, before we dive into everything else that we are going to cover. You know, it feels in so many ways these days like everyone has a podcast. So why tune in every single week? Why listen each week? And I firstly want to say that everything that I do on this podcast is going to be about you. It's going to be for you. It's going to be about how we can learn together, how we can grow together. The thing is, I think we see so many of these shiny, perfect photos all over Instagram or these curated moments, right? And we're watching stories and YouTube and, TikTok and all of these different places where social media is coming together. And it's so polished and it's so perfect. And we try to share the moments that aren't perfect in between all of it, but it's still curated. So I wanted a space where we can talk to the people that we follow on these platforms or the people that we see in the world and get to know their stories. I want to peel back their layers. I want to pull back the curtain. I want to talk about the stuff that's not so pretty. I want to talk about the messy stuff. I want to talk about how people got to where they are today, the moments where they struggled, the moments where they triumphed. And I think what I've noticed is that we are all on this quest. We are all on this journey to find our very best self. What we don't really realize is that that journey is not linear and the journey is never ending. So that's what this podcast is. That's what this podcast is all about. I realized as well that this thing called life that we're all going through, we do it on our own, but we don't do it alone. And the Very Best Self podcast is like this secret weapon that you have in your back pocket where you get to listen to these stories and learn from other people's mistakes and learn from other people's missteps and, find courage along the way to go after the things that we want to make happen in our lives, to go after our dreams, to manifest it all, to make it happen, whatever, what have you, right? Because this life it's short and we only get one. So my mission and my purpose is to talk about the stuff that makes us who we are, to talk about the things that make us tick, to talk about the things that make us feel the most alive. And so that after each and every episode, my hope and my dream and my wish for you is that you feel inspired, that you find something for you in every single episode that makes you feel like, yeah, I can go out there and I can make my dreams come true and I can do all of these things that maybe everybody else tells me I can't do, and I can do it. So that's what this is. It's the Very Best Self podcast, right? So that we can each journey through life connecting to our very best self, knowing that that journey is never ending and we will always be reaching for more. So I will begin today's episode with a story about how I became so obsessed and in love with all things self-help, self-development. And so like most things in life, that story begins when I was a little girl. So I was in the 3rd grade And I guess I'll start with my grandpa, who's one of the most he's a big inspiration in my life. And so my grandfather is an incredible man, and he used to build airplanes. Now, when I say build airplanes, I mean like he started them in his basement from nothing and then built them and flew them in the air, like in the actual sky. Okay. So he built 4 airplanes in his lifetime. And he was, just this incredible, incredible guy. There's articles written about him in the Smithsonian magazine. He was, part of the FAA, and he had this like specific pilot's license that very, very, very few pilots have ever, reached this level of success and had gotten this license. So he could inspect planes, and he was just, aviation was his life. It was in his DNA. It was like his lifeblood. It was everything to him. And so I was always around that all of my life. And, you know, the story goes that, as they say, the apple does not fall far from the tree, right? So my Aunt Nancy was also, his daughter, super into aviation, right, as well. And so I was in the 3rd grade, and I was really, really close to my Aunt Nancy. We were super close. And so she was 19 years old at the time, and she was going to get her pilot's license to learn how to fly a plane. And so she went up for her lesson to learn how to become a pilot. And this was her very first lesson. And she went up, and, she's ridden with my grandpa 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times before. And the way that this sort of story goes, there's those defining moments that make us who we are, right? Like, let me not cry in episode 1, guys. But there's these moments that make you who you are. And so I was in 3rd grade, and we were super close, and she went up on that, that first flight for her lesson. And there was a horrible, horrible accident. And unfortunately, that was the end of her life. So she did not return from that flight. And so that was really hard on my family. It was hard on everybody. But being, so close to her and being in the 3rd grade, it was just an interesting time in my life to go through that. And so my grandma has always been my best friend. And so she was my best friend before my Aunt Nancy passed away. And so I was always spending every weekend at my grandma's house. Like, I always was there. I was obsessed with being at grandma's house. Because my Aunt Nancy also lived there, so I got to see her all the time. But my grandma and I were best friends, and still are to this day. She's all over my Instagram. If you ever follow me, whenever I'm home in Maryland, I'm like, my friends call her the Chick-fil-A grandma because she loves Chick-fil-A like so much. And so it's pretty funny. That's a whole other side note. But anyway, my grandma went on this epic healing journey, right? So you have two options, I think, when unfortunately, she had to bury her child. And this is heavy for episode 1, but it's really just about who I am and why I'm here. And so you have 2 options. You either give up or you choose to live. And so she chose, and her choice was to live. And she went on this healing journey where she was seeing psychic mediums, and she was, reading all of these self-help books. And so every weekend when I went to grandma's house, things changed pretty quickly. Overnight, it almost felt like, obviously. And so instead of reading stories before bedtime, or playing video games or anything like that, I was always thrown into this self-help world at such a young age. And so before bedtime, my bedtime stories were Dr. Phil. My bedtime stories were reading books about Oprah. And the first book that I ever read in my life was The Power of Positive Thinking for Young People. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. The Power of Positive Thinking for Young People. And I actually have a copy of that book. And so that was the first book that I ever read cover to cover with my grandma. And I remember she leaned so heavily into gratitude. She leaned so heavily into healing. She leaned so heavily into how can I take this awful, terrible thing that happened? And how can I turn it into something beautiful? And how can I learn from this? And how can I grow from this? And how can I still survive and show up in the world? And so I learned a lot about gratitude at such a young age. And I remember driving down the road with my grandma all the time. And when I was a kid, it always felt like she said all of these things and they would go in one ear and out the other. And I somehow knew she was on her healing journey. And so I never corrected her. I never stopped her. I always remember just being like, okay, I'll let her just say what she wants to say. And I remember most of the time, mostly distinctly, driving down the road. And she would always say this certain thing, which is, isn't it so amazing how, God paints us this new picture in the sky with the clouds every single day? And aren't we so lucky that the sun is shining today? And how good does the wind feel on your face? And, we're just so lucky we get this beautiful new picture every day. And as I said, I remember always thinking it was going in one ear and out the other. And I didn't really realize until much, much later in my life the profound effect that all of that had on who I am and sort of what I think my purpose in life is and why I think I'm here. And that's really just to be a guide and to help people on their healing journey and to really, I guess, shine a light that we are so much more alike than we are different, all of us. And we don't realize that so often. We look around and we think, that's their life and that's their story. And, rich or poor or, successful or not successful or where you're from or where you're born. We use all of these things as measurements towards ourselves. And the thing is, behind closed doors, our heart aches over the same things. We have our heart broken. We deal with pain. We deal with suffering. We deal with loss. Each and every one of us, we deal with all of those things. And like I said, we are so much more alike than we ever are different. And so that is really just like one small piece of my story and why I wanted to start this podcast. And it's because I want to share those stories. I'm sure the people that follow me on Instagram, a lot of them, or who ride with me at SoulCycle or ride with me, all over the sphere of, the SoulCycle at home bike, they didn't know that story that I just shared. They didn't probably know that about me or what makes me who I am. But that's what this is about. We all have those defining moments. We all have those stories. And so I want to share those stories from the people that we follow on Instagram or on TikTok or out in the world, where you just see this shiny, perfect, polished person. But where did they find that inspiration to be who they are? Where did they find that inspiration to create the business they created? Or, you'll come to find out that I am wildly, wildly obsessed with athletes and the mindset of athletes, because I think there's a differentiating factor between what makes someone an incredible athlete and then what makes them like the GOATs, like the greatest of all time, right? Like, what is it that separates them? And I think it's their mindset. I think it's their stories. I think it's how, like I said before, we all have these stories, but then I think it's also really interesting how we choose to allow our stories to define us, right? So we can use our stories as a crutch. We can say, I can't do this, or I can't go here, or I can't make this happen in my life because A, B, C, or D happened to me. And because of that, I can't do it. Or we can use our stories to make us stronger. We can use our stories for the reason why we can do something. And I truly wholeheartedly believe that that is the case, no matter what your story is. So I think that's the differentiating factor between who's good at what they do and then the GOATs, the greatest of all time. Those people use those stories as their octane fuel. That's how they fuel the jet, right? That's how they take off. That's how they go all in and go all out, is they use those stories to make them who they are, to make them stronger. And that's what this is about. So I'm beyond excited to start this journey with you. I cannot wait to share all of these incredible, incredible people, these incredible stories, these incredible interviews. And I hope that you will tune in each and every week to listen to these stories. And I hope that there is something for you in every single episode. So we can peel back those layers, we can pull back the curtain, we can realize that we are all on this quest and this journey to connect with our very best self. So welcome to the Very Best Self podcast. I will be your host, Victoria Brown. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to hearing about what you want to hear more of, what you want to hear more about. We're going to talk about nothing is off the table. We're going to talk about all the stuff, all the things. We're going to talk about the easy stuff. We're going to talk about the hard stuff. We're going to talk about how to become your very best self, recognizing that that journey is never ending. So there will be another episode beyond this one already here for you to consume. And I will be uploading new episodes weekly, which is super exciting. So I can't wait to hear from you. I hope that you will please give me 5 stars, comment, like, rate, subscribe, all the stuff and all the things, because that's how this thing is going to really take off. And that's how this thing is really going to get going. And also the biggest thing here is that if you find something that makes you feel inspired, share it with someone that you love. Share this with someone that you love. Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride. I am beyond excited, and I will see you soon. As always, thank you. I appreciate you for listening to today's episode, for hitting that subscribe button, and maybe most importantly, for leaving a positive review. If you loved this episode, please pay it forward and share it with someone that you love. That's how we keep this thing going. You can find me on Instagram at Victoria Brown, or connect with me and the Very Best Self Squad on our pod page at Very Best Self. Don't forget, no matter where you are on your journey, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. I'll see you next time, squad.